Hello, and a quiet welcome back to the dusty Codex. We all know the famous dates that end an era. We know 1453, the year the great cannons of Mehmet the Conqueror finally tore down the walls of Constantinople, ending the Roman Empire forever. But what if I told you that was not the city's greatest test? That 700 years earlier, a far larger, more powerful force came to destroy it? We are always curious to know where our stories are traveling to and where your corner of the world is. Please, take a moment to let us know in the comments where you are watching from today. In the year 717 AD, the Umayyad Caliphate, the largest empire on earth, arrived at the gates of Constantinople. They brought an army of over 120,000 men and a fleet of 1,800 ships, a force that dwarfed the one that would finally succeed 7 centuries later. The Byzantine Empire was on the verge of collapse. It was weak, its government in chaos, its people terrified. But it had 3 things: an impregnable set of walls, a brilliant new warrior emperor, and a terrifying secret weapon. This is the story of the Second Siege of Constantinople, the great siege you've never heard of. It's a tale of a year-long struggle, a savage winter, a liquid flame, and a desperate, near-miraculous survival that arguably saved Christendom, preventing Europe from becoming a province of the Caliphate. To understand the stakes, we must first understand the Umayyad Caliphate. In the 100 years since the death of the Prophet Muhammad, the Islamic armies had expanded with a speed that defied belief. By 717 AD, they were the undisputed superpower of the world. They had conquered the Persian Empire, all of North Africa, and had just crossed into Spain. Their empire stretched from the borders of India to the Atlantic Ocean. Only one glittering prize remained: Rome, the city of the Romans, Constantinople. It was a matter of both strategy and religious prophecy. To conquer the Golden Apple was to prove the supremacy of their faith and to seize the wealthiest city on earth. The Caliph Suleiman assembled the largest expeditionary force of the medieval age, a true all-in gamble. He gave command to his brother, the famed general Maslama ibn al-Malik, with one simple, chilling order: conquer the city or do not return. The Umayyads were attacking a Byzantine empire that was on its deathbed. It had been ravaged by 20 years of civil war, with 7 emperors in 2 decades. It was in this moment of total chaos that a new man seized the throne, a brilliant general from the provinces named Leo III, the Isaurian. Leo III was a self-made man, a master of diplomacy, and a hardened soldier. He knew he couldn't beat the Umayyads in a fair fight. He had to cheat. In one of history's most audacious cons, Leo, who was then just a general, entered into secret negotiations with Maslama. He pretended he was a usurper who would help the Arabs conquer the city, if they, in turn, helped him secure the throne. Maslama, believing Leo was his puppet, agreed. This bought Leo precious time. He seized the throne for himself in March 717 AD, and immediately began a frantic, last-ditch preparation. He repaired the walls, stockpiled all the grain from the surrounding countryside, and prepared his secret weapon. In the summer of 717 AD, Maslama arrived, his army of 120,000 men darkening the horizon. He soon realized he had been tricked. Leo was not his puppet, he was his jailer. The city gates were shut. The Umayyad army was stunned by the Theodosian walls. This was the most advanced fortification system on earth. The Arabs, expecting a quick victory, found themselves locked in a brutal, grinding siege against a fortress that had never been breached. Maslama's plan was simple: blockade the city by land and blockade it by sea. He ordered his massive fleet of 1,800 ships to sail into the Bosphorus, drop anchor, and seal the Golden Horn, cutting off all food and supplies. The Umayyad admiral, Suleiman, was confident. The tiny, rump Byzantine fleet cowering in the harbor was a joke compared to his armada. He sailed forward to trap them, and in doing so, sailed directly into the kill box. As the Umayyad armada crowded into the narrow strait, Leo III gave the order. The small, fast Byzantine ships, equipped with a strange siphon-like device on their prows, sailed out to meet them. What happened next was a scene from hell. The siphons unleashed Greek fire. This was not a simple fire. It was a 7th century chemical weapon, a sticky, petroleum-based and nitrate-enhanced liquid that could not be put out with water. It was the medieval equivalent of napalm. The Umayyad fleet was completely unprepared for this. The fire stuck to their wooden hulls, it stuck to their sails, and it stuck to their men. Worse, it floated on the water, creating a burning sea that consumed anyone who jumped overboard. In a single afternoon, a huge portion of the Umayyad fleet was annihilated. The naval blockade was broken. The surviving Arab ships fled, their crews utterly terror-stricken, refusing to go near the Byzantine fire ships again. The city's sea lanes were open. A wall of stone, a jet of fire. The Umayyad army was trapped outside, and their fleet was terrified to come close. The first high-tech phase of the battle was over, but the siege was not. Maslama, the Arab general, was a stubborn and brilliant commander. He had lost his fleet, but he still had his army, and he still had time. He would not be beaten by a trick. He would starve the city out. He ordered his men to dig in for the winter. If these stories were a single, desperate invention, a secret guarded by a dying empire, can turn the tide of history, are what you seek, I invite you to subscribe to the Dusty Codex. Your support allows us to continue bringing these incredible tales of ingenuity and survival to light. Maslama's decision to winter outside the walls was a fatal miscalculation. The winter of 717-718 AD was not a normal winter. It was a great frost, a once-in-a-century weather event. For over 100 days, the ground was covered in deep snow. The Umayyad soldiers, men from the deserts of Syria and the warm plains of Egypt, had never experienced anything like it. They began to freeze to death in their tents. Their supply lines, already weak, were completely cut. The army's thousands of horses and camels starved and froze, their bodies eventually eaten by the desperate soldiers. Disease, specifically plague and dysentery, swept through the weakened camp. Inside the walls, the Byzantines suffered too. Food was at starvation-level rations, but they were sheltered from the elements. They were surviving. Their enemies, however, were dying in droves right outside their gates. When spring finally came, the Umayyad army was a shadow of its former self. But the Caliph was determined. He sent 2 massive reinforcement fleets from Egypt and North Africa. This was the final turning point. The crews of the Egyptian fleet were Coptic Christians who had been pressed into service. As they sailed past Constantinople, they saw the great Christian capital holding out. In a massive, coordinated defection, they overpowered their Muslim officers and sailed their ships straight into the Golden Horn, surrendering to Emperor Leo. Leo III had one more card to play. He had activated his treaty with the Bulgars to the north. A massive army of Bulgar cavalry, led by Khan Tervel, swept down and attacked the Umayyad army from the rear. Trapped between the Bulgars and the walls, the Arab army was slaughtered in the thousands. The siege was over. Maslama, his army destroyed by fire, frost, plague, and the Bulgars, had failed. On August 15th, 718 AD, exactly 1 year after he had arrived, he burned his siege engines and began the long, humiliating retreat. The land retreat was a death march. The starving remnants of the army were picked apart by the Bulgars in the hostile terrain. Of the 120,000 men who had arrived, only 30,000 are thought to have made it back to Umayyad territory, but the fate of the fleet was even worse. As the surviving 700 ships limped home through the Aegean, they were hit by a cataclysmic storm. This, combined with a volcanic eruption and attacks by Byzantine patrols, annihilated what was left. Ancient sources claim that of the 1,800 ships that set out, only 5 made it back to the Umayyad port of Alexandria. It was one of the greatest naval disasters in human history. The defeat at Constantinople was a catastrophe for the Umayyad Caliphate. The loss of manpower and treasure was so great that it crippled their state. It marked the end of their expansion, and many historians argue this catastrophic failure was a key factor in their eventual overthrow by the Abbasids just 30 years later. For Byzantium and Europe, the victory was a miracle. The empire, saved from extinction, would survive for another 700 years. The impenetrable barrier of Constantinople had held, preventing the Umayyad wave from sweeping into Eastern Europe, just as it had been stopped at Tours in the west. This desperate, fiery, and frozen battle, fought in 717 AD, ensured that the history of Europe would be written in Latin and Greek, not Arabic.